Hello again. Having fun with cosmic consciousness? Well, we have not yet scratched the surface. There are so many issues that come up, and we'll have to tackle them in various ways. First question that arises, that we have located time in the soul. Later on you could call it mind, maybe with modern philosophers will talk about that later on. But now if time is time awareness, time consciousness is in the soul, the issue arises, how do we remember the past events? One thing that is given for granted, that if things are temporal, they change. How do we explain change? Well, one major explanation throughout history, Western and other histories, and we shall speak of other histories, other ways of thinking, whether it's Buddhism, Zen, Taoism, and so on. But what is at issue right now is how do we understand the present events? And that present events are changing. So how are we to understand change? Well, the introduction to explain change is based on causality. Something is given right now because something caused it to be what it is. In short, if we talk about human beings, children, well, children are here because someone caused them to come into existence. In short, to talk about things as happening now, we have to explain them in terms of the causes that made them be given at present. In short, we are here because our grandparents in the past caused their children. Their children are our parents, and they're the causes of our being here and now. So changes are explained by causes. And causes are a sequence, one after the other. What is given now is caused by some previous event, and that previous event had to have a cause to make it come into existence, and that cause that caused it into existence had to have another cause. So now, one after the other causes must have other causes before them, and other causes before them. In short, before my grandparents were born, there had to be other parents. And before they started, they had to have other parents. And here the question arises, before those parents or great-great-grandparents could start existing, they had to have grandparents and grandparents before them. But before them, they had to have other grandparents and great-great-great-great-great-grandparents before them. So the philosophical question that, for example, Aristotle raised, can we have causes going back into infinity? In short, before something starts moving, you have to have a cause before that, and before that, and before that. And if you have to push sequence of causes into infinity, there will not be any motion. Because before any cause begins, you still have to have another cause. And you have to keep pushing the causal sequence into infinity, and we shall never reach infinity. That means there is no cause that started anything, because you need something else to cause that first cause. Infinity cannot be reached. And that means if you have infinite series of causalities, nothing will start moving. In principle, you will still have to have another cause before that. So, if infinite series of causes cannot be an explanation for a movement, then Aristotle's answer is there must be a first mover which is not caused. Because if it is caused, then you will go back into infinite series of causes and nothing starts moving. So Aristotle says there must be a first cause, first mover, which cannot be caused. So the question is, what kind of first mover must we have in order to move everything without itself not being moved? Now that's a fantastic question. So Aristotle's answer is very unique. His claim is that the first mover, which cannot be moved, cannot be in the past. Because whatever is in the past is a series of causes which always lead to infinity of causes which cannot be given as causes. So his answer is that a first mover is not moving, not because it cannot move, but because it does not have to move everything else. It is a perfect, changeless something that moves by attraction. In short, the universe, if it is in motion, it is in motion because it moves by being attracted to something. So to speak, a purpose. Now, how can something attract the universe to move? Well, let's take a number of examples. That something can move us without being moved. When we study something, okay, let's say you are a scientist and you have to have a scientific methodology, which is mathematics. Mathematics does not move. It's a given. 2 plus 2 is 4 equals minus 3 equals 1. That does not move. Mathematics are ideal. And so when I study mathematics, I study something that attracts me. But mathematics does not have to move or change to attract my interest and attract my study to become a mathematician. In short, if we talk about a just society, and we have an idea, as Plato would say, we have a perfect idea of what just society would be. Now, in order to establish that just society, we have to work very hard. But the idea of a just society which attracts us is not in motion, and yet it makes us move. Okay? It's lots of debates are part of philosophy when people talk about utopian society. Well, utopian society is not a thing. It is an idea, and we're trying to establish it not because it moves us from the past, but because it attracts us. It is our purpose. Okay? So, being human, one of our purposes that attracts us is to become a fully grown, mature person. We are moved by a purpose to become that person. In short, the prime mover of the universe that moves the whole universe does so by attraction. It is a purpose of the whole universe to develop itself to a full perfection. Okay. What that means, we don't know yet. Maybe we shall have to discover what it is later. Nevertheless, the first mover is required for anything to move, and the first mover cannot be in motion. So now, how do we know of this first mover? Because as it attracts us and everything as a future. So we posit a condition for the movement of everything as everything having a purpose to be reached, and the purpose is in the future. But that purpose in the future does not change. No matter what we do, we still are attracted by that purpose as a prime mover. So now we have to have a cosmic consciousness which says that we are moving toward the future, and the future must be something that is given as a perfect future. You can call it ideal, you can call it a utopia, you can call it a divine being. There are varieties ways of articulating that perfect attraction, and yet all of them are permanent. Okay? In short, the prime mover as attraction never changes. If it were to change, then you would say, well, it's not a prime mover. Then you could say there are many prime movers. Then we don't know which one to enact and which one to establish. So the notion is there must be one prime mover. Okay? Different cultures, different civilizations establish various imageries of that prime mover. Nevertheless, one common feature of it is that it itself does not change. It is eternal. If it were not eternal and changing, then it would not be prime mover. So good. So now the question of this prime mover as moving the entire universe as an attraction must be deciphered. Otherwise, philosophy would fail. We would be blind to what's going on. We say there is a condition for the universe to move, for things to change, but the change is explainable because there is a cause which causes change. Good. Now, one feature of that cosmic, so to speak, purpose is that it cannot be material or physical, because all physical things change. Excuse me. Let us look at the notion of that all physical things change. We have established a modern reality, and remember that modern reality is material. Things are composed of material parts. And material parts are also involved in causality, in causes. So let's explore this dimension, that everything that is material, atomistic, is being caused. And so we have modern reality, modern, what philosophers call ontology. The modern being, the modern reality is material, and that means whatever is now, it had to be caused by material conditions before what is going on now. So those material conditions are in a sequence. As we talked just a while ago, that means that if we have a material arrangement of particles right now, there must have been other material arrangements before these arrangements given right now. And then there are other arrangements before that. Now, to make sure that those arrangements don't go into an infinite past, because that would mean there is no change, we invented mechanical laws. What rule all material physical events have to be ruled by what you would call mechanical causes. For example, why the planets turn around the sun? Well, because they are attracted by gravity. All right, so what we have just done is introduced gravity as a force which makes things attract one another. Right? Bigger things like the sun attract the smaller things like planets. So there is a gravitational attraction. So we still are in the same, so to speak, boat, because we're talking about gravity as explaining things by attraction. We still have attraction as, so to speak, a purpose. But then, if we let ourselves loose and claim that the material events, the atoms of which everything is composed, or the smallest particles of which all things are composed, we have to raise the question, well, how did all that begin? How did those events, those atoms combining and recombining from thousands of years after thousands of years, so how did that all stuff begin? And we have now a modern explanation. As we all know, the cosmic events, the universe itself, began with a big bang. Everybody takes that for granted. In fact, they even have a time when it began, 13.8 billion years ago. Okay, we grant that. Philosophy doesn't mind granting people their right to have their explanations. No question. But we run into a snag, and that is the past. How do we get to the past? Well, remember what St. Augustine and even Aristotle talked about, well, the past is gone, so to speak, all events of the past are gone. As Augustine said, time has annihilated them. They are no more. And if there's anything left of them, they are in our memory. We agreed. Of course they are in our memory. I remember. My friend, I remember having been in Japan. I remember having been in a war way back before all of you were born. So, my memory guarantees that what happened in the past and that means what has disappeared and gone is in my memory. We have a good explanation. We agree on that. But suddenly, philosophers like Plato and even his teacher Socrates would say, you guys have a funny theory of memory, that attempts to say how we experience the past, which is gone in reality. So now, in the same kind of direction, we would ask, so Big Bang that happened 13.5 billion or 13.8 billion years ago, the Big Bang is gone. It's no longer. So the Big Bang must be where? In my memory. Now, wait a minute. I might be old, but I certainly did not live 13.8 billion years ago so that I could remember the Big Bang. No one has been around. If we say that empirical science has demonstrated that something happened 13.8 billion years ago, empirical science means to see something or to have seen something, to have been there. Like we have been to McDonald's, and we remember McDonald's, we had to have been there to say, I remember McDonald's that I visited 10 years ago. Empirically. So now we talked about that. I have an image of a Big Mac that I had 10 years ago. And that image does not change. Remember, we talked about that. Images do not change. They remain constant, and we'll have to deal with that very profoundly. Where are those images if they don't change? Now, but I cannot have an image of a Big Bang that I remember as an image of what happened 13.8 billion years ago. I was not around. Aha. Well, I mean, science will not shun my questions. It will give me an explanation. Of course, my memory is not long enough. But then, maybe, my genetic material, my biochemistry, has codes implanted in my physiological being, my material physiology, or what you call it, biological material. So now the question is, and the scientists once tried to answer this question. I raised this question at some biological conference. They said, of course, remember, and it asked me to remember, that life on this planet began 4 billion years ago with little wiggly and twiggly amoebas. And those amoebas transmitted their codes throughout all the evolution, and those codes are the memory, what happened 4 billion years ago. Genetic explanation. And we got that explanation all over the world. Amazing. So here I sit, I say, the reason I remember the Big Bang because it was given through my genetic biological codes. But then you say, wait a minute, that's something not quite right. Why not? Well, let's give us 4 billion years ago of life on this planet. And that memory is my memory of 4 billion years ago. But wait a minute. You said the Big Bang happened 13.8 billion years ago. Well, the genetic codes were not around because there were not even atoms at that time. There were fields of energy. The way they talk, I accept the way they talk. So I have no memory, even if my biology carries the memory of all the initial amoebas 4 billion years ago. So what kind of consciousness must I have beyond my memory to talk about what happened 13.8 billion years ago? I haven't been around. No one has been around. So how can I talk about this cosmic vastness, which is not in my memory? So consciousness as memory is inadequate. What is going on? I mean, after all, we talk about the universe, and we talk about the vastness of time. The same thing happens when I hear, and when we all hear, that the future, which according to my consciousness depends on my expectations. I expect to meet a friend next year, and I shall meet him. And even I expect to maybe visit friends in in California or in New York. In fact, I will have to visit friends in New York. I was already invited to be there in May to give a talk to psychiatrists concerning consciousness. Okay. Lots of people now claim there is no such a thing as consciousness. In fact, there are books by scientists and so forth, Consciousness Explained, and they talk about biology, chemistry, genetics, DNA, and all of that. And that's why, when we talk about the past memory, well, it's in our genes, in our biological history, in the history of all life on this planet. Well, that's fine. They already say that there is no other consciousness except for the biological coding and so forth. Well, and yet suddenly they talk about future. We shall calculate what will happen 4 billion years from now. Okay, wait a minute. My expectations in my lifespan will no longer be maybe 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, I don't know, it doesn't matter. But my expectations cannot reach what will happen 4 billion years ago. But we talk about it. In fact, in a very scary way. We talk about that 4 billion years from now, the galaxy Andromeda will crash into our galaxy. Now, that's empirical. Well, have we been there 4 billion years from now to see that galaxy crash into our galaxy? Observation, empirical observation. What kind of consciousness do we have? What will happen in 4 billion years? It is no longer adequate to talk about my expectations as a future. We have gone beyond memory and expectations. And yet we still talk about cosmic consciousness. So now we have to return to the invention, if you recall, if you remember, okay, our memory has to be adequate for to include what we talked about last time, which wasn't that long ago. So if we invented a modern subject, okay, remember we talked about the world is material, atomistic, so to speak, sum of parts. The stone is composed of little parts, as they are very compact. The water is composed of the same little parts, but they are less compact. And air is composed of the same parts, except they are less compact than water. But no matter what, we are all, in reality, composed of those parts. Okay? As somebody said, we are 80% of water particles, okay, H2O. Wow, so to speak, we are walking bags of water, H2O atoms. Of course, there are other parts apart from water. There are biological parts, chemical parts. They are simply more compact parts than water, okay? Some scientists said we are carbon-based units floating in H2O. Okay, so here we are, sacks of water full of carbon-based units, and we are talking. Okay, so it must be the atoms trying to communicate with each other. There is nothing more to us than that. Okay, but so no matter what, we are talking, okay? And we're trying to understand what's going on. And that's philosophy. We accept what they say, but we will not accept as total truth. We are philosophical. And philosophy has a right and a duty to question. Because remember when we talked about what is the birth of philosophy? And one reason for the birth of philosophy, because we human beings are fallible. We make mistakes. Our great proclamations can be mistaken, and therefore we have to question them in public arena, debate in public, in open discourse, every question, every proposal. Because even the greatest authorities may be fallible. Okay? We had Newton explaining everything by gravity, and Einstein says, so sorry, that's not quite enough. Not that Newton was absolutely wrong, but he was inadequate. As turns out that Einstein might be inadequate. So we question one another, and we question even the greatest, so to speak, theories or philosophical proposals, because they are proposals by fallible humans. So now that's why we can't question the current announcements and current explanations, whether they're adequate. We'll get back to images and concepts, which are something else. Now, so let's go back to the world as material, as atomistic, sum of particles, no matter how small they are. And the decision was that the subject, the experiencing subject, does not belong into that material world. Okay? Because that material world does not have any qualities. In short, particles, and whether atoms or quarks or whatever you have, are neither blue, red, or green, neither loud nor noisy, nor smooth or tasty. All those qualities don't belong to the material world. They are subjective. Okay? And the rest of the world that we live every day, such as valuations, values, artworks, love, hate, passion, okay, imagination, they do not exist in the material world. Okay, so now all that is subjective. So we return back to one thing. If everything in the universe, in the material universe, is caused by material causes, and if the subject, modern subject, that is aware qualitatively, experiences colors, hears sounds, tastes cucumbers and sausages and all those tastes, touches, and colors and sounds do not exist in reality. They are subjective. Then material causes cannot explain or be a cause of our direct experience, that is, qualitative experience, because the subject does not belong in that material world. I mean, by definition, the decision to have a universe as material and materially caused means that a subject which does not belong to that universe cannot be caused. So, you cannot explain us scientifically. Okay? So now, let's raise the ante a little bit. Now modern sciences say that whatever philosophy before modern philosophical theses or claims was, in quotes, discovered, philosophy was mistaken. Remember, we talked about essences. We talked about limits. That is, the world is full of things, and each specific thing belongs to a specific essence. So humans have a human essence that limits us to be human and not monkeys or angels. Monkeys will remain monkeys. They have their essential composition, as dogs will be dogs. Even if they are our best friends, better than humans, still we are human. And so all these categories by which all things were defined, in quotes, objectively, all those categories, all the definitions that gave us our being human, having our human essence, objectively, they are no longer relevant. If everything objectively is material, then there is no distinction materially between a stone and you and me. We're made of the same particles, same components. Okay. That means that when we talk about causality, material causality, the subject cannot be affected. So here we are in a quandary, but at the same time, when the categories are no longer valid, okay, as a modern philosopher by the name of Descartes said, when I see things perceptually, I perceive humans, I perceive cats, I can doubt whether they exist, because what I see is purely subjective. Objectively, I cannot see the material world. I see qualitatively, I see a human being with having specific color, specific size. Well, that is no longer objective. That means all that we perceive can be in doubt. All that we can perceive through senses, all that we can think is not objective. Thinking is subjective. So what I'm saying is that we have to be very clear where we are in modern philosophical world, which also is modern scientific world. Okay? The world in reality objectively is matter. What is matter is, what is not material is subjective. Since matter can only cause matter, it cannot cause anything that is not material, and therefore the subject is excluded from causality. Okay. So now you have heard lots of claims by scientists. We can explain who we are. Biologically, chemistry will deal with that. I call that philosophical reductionism, trying to reduce us to material, biological, chemical, biochemical, and so on reality. And that is, and we'll see the philosophical arguments, what is involved in this effort to reduce us to that reality. But meanwhile, we have a modern subject, and the subject must decide how to understand the universe, how our consciousness, now we are subject as consciousness. We have no cause for our being as a subject. We have no reality, objective reality. And since objective reality is the only thing there is, then the subject does not exist in any shape or form as existence. So what is it? And now the subject, nonetheless, is responsible to understand the world which we cannot see, we cannot touch, we cannot taste, we cannot smell. How do we get to that world? After all, we're talking about cosmos, material universe, objective universe. And yet we cannot access it through our perception. No way. As somebody said, that ask any scientist, well, what you see doesn't exist. In reality, you get light waves. Light waves have no colors, they have frequencies. That's all you get. So where is the tree? Well, the light waves coming, nothing more. So now we are in that situation. How this subject that cannot have a direct experience of that material reality can deal with that material reality. Okay. I'll give you a final example of the way that scientists give you that material reality. I was at the University of Chicago, and the scientists from physical labs, and we invite all the faculty to see how we split the atom. I said, wow, this is fantastic. I will watch how atom is split. So there were lots of machinery apparatus on the stage. And, you know, I imagine splitting an atom, and you have an axe and you chop the atom in half. Well, we're sitting there, the lights went out, and then the lights went on. And the chief physicist said, "Did you see the atom getting split?" I was looking for a guy with an axe. Well, didn't you see the red light flash? I saw a red light flash. Red is subjective. I didn't see the atom. So we didn't see anything in there called atom. We saw a red flash. That's subjective, according to their theory, to modern philosophy. So now how do we get out of this subject to see the world, which we cannot see? And that is the issue we shall tackle next time. I appreciate your attention and your presence and your interest, and we shall get to work next time. Thank you much.